Here we go, here we go, here we go. Here we go, it's Tuesday night. Tuesday night. It's Tuesday night. It's Tuesday night. Let's see here. Okay. All right. Let's go, buddy.
Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, guys. Yes, I am back. Woohoo! Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sundays. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Rumble. And welcome back, guys. I'm back from my trip. I had a great time, good chance to unwind. Hopefully there were enough clips for you guys uploaded while I was gone, but now I am back live. So yeah, it's kind of weird when you take breaks and you're not streaming on nights you usually stream. It was weird not being here Friday night. It was weird not being here Sunday, but I'm back now and pumped and energized as ever. So a lot of news happened while I was away. I'm not going to be able to cover everything. So I've actually split some of these news stories up into 2 different nights. I'm going to cover 5 of them tonight, and then the rest I'm going to cover tomorrow. So a lot has happened. Want to go ahead and give quick shout outs to people in the chat. What is going on, guys? Shout out to CBC Voter, says, happy Tuesday, Sabby Sabs, doobie-doo. What's going on, Lawrence, who's a Sabby member, says, doobie-doobie-doo, God save the queen. I saw that clip from Joe Biden. Shout out to Notori, sends love and fire. Greetings, Ben, who's a Sabby member, says, it's about time, Sabs. Definitely been missing my favorite show the last few days. Oh, well, I am back. I'm back. I missed you guys, too. Shout out to Robbie, says, hola, Sabsters. Greetings, Hannah, says, I missed you, Sabby. Shout out to Eric, who's a Sabby member, says, hey, they're lefty friends. Greetings, Douglas. U.S. citizens or U.S. oligarchs? 2 different answers for today's poll. Go ahead and hit that poll if you haven't had a chance to do so. I want you to be honest. It was very close, like right before I went live. So I'm curious to see what the end result will be. Shout out to Larez, says, bonjour, Sabrina, Eric, and Sabby fam. Hope y'all had a great weekend. Smash the like. Hotez is such a corrupt joke. Dor played the Orphalevit of him. It was hilarious. Glad Africa met Putin. Interesting. Shout out to Gamer, says, hello. Greetings. Whoops, I skipped one. Oh, I did. I skipped a couple. Greetings, Joe, says the U.S. should be concerned that Putin is meeting with African leaders. It is truly the beginning of the end for the empirical colonization. Shout out to Mark, says, Sabby. Greetings, Dr. Nick, says, hi, everybody. What's going on? Danny says, hot mic. I am loud on the mic tonight, aren't I? I'm loud. Shout out to Cronus, says, change answer on poll to yes. Greetings, Casey, sends solidarity and fire. Shout out to Cassie, says, Sabby, love. What's going on, Bad Cookies? I answered yes to your poll, Sabby. For odd reasons, the U.S. should be concerned with African leaders meeting Putin. because it further illustrates the USA's complete failure. Ooh, interesting take there. Greetings, Carrie says, Casey, long time no see since Richie 2 minutes ago. What's going on? Peace Dove says, doogie doogie doo. Shout out to Bryce says, what up, Sabby? Hopefully you enjoyed your time off. Sup, everyone. I did. Shout out to Jay Rich, who's a Sabby member, says, Sabby, what it doobie doobie do? I like that. Greetings, ACAB says, hey, everyone. Shout out to Ashura says, no, the U.S. shouldn't be concerned with whom Putin meets since it's none of their damn business. Let Black people deal with whom they want. Interesting. And shout out to Desert Manis, who gives a what's up to Gamer for Life, says this must be the place to be. Greetings, Pitchforks are coming, who's a Sabby member, says hello, peeps. Shout out to Bree, says yeehaw. Greetings, Jabba the Cat, who's a Sabby member, says yay. Welcome back, Sabby. Thank you so much. Oh dear. So we do have a lot to discuss tonight. Really quick though, I want to give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters, Sabbies, and of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Michael Marella. Whoop, whoop. Thank you guys so much. Really does help me out. All righty. Let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? Just going to take a sip for a second because oh dear, so much to discuss. I had to take a sip of tea first. All right, let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail to show you what we are discussing tonight. Here we go. Tonight, we are discussing Joe Rogan and RFK Jr. Jesus, who knew an interview could blow up in such a way that it would get the attention of mainstream media? And there seems to be a challenge there for debate. We're going to get into all of that. We're also going to discuss Dr. Cornel West on Fox News. And also, which I couldn't fit all this here, I'm also going to show you a clip from the interview that Pasta from Combo Couch had with Dr. West that I think we should address as well as another issue that is happening in reference to censorship. So we're going to connect all the dots here. I'm also going to discuss Africa meets Russia. Oh, dear God. I tried to warn people that this was coming, and here we are. What was this meeting about? And to that poll question, should the U.S. government be concerned? Yes or no, or you're not sure? I'm also going to discuss, this seemed to fly under the radar a bit, Merrick Garland's speech. He had an announcement here that I haven't seen too many people cover this, and I think you guys need to hear what the DOJ found in their investigation. And I'm also going to discuss unions back Joe Biden. What a joke. I have so much to say about that. And Biden looks pretty sneaky there in that picture. So I want to get started with this story here about Merrick Garland, because like I said, I haven't seen a lot of coverage of this. And I think we need to all remember what was done a couple years ago in reference to George Floyd and what happened after that. And I'm not talking about what happened in reference to the protest. I'm talking about the fact that the Justice Department decided to investigate the Minneapolis Police Department. Now, this is kind of, in a way, kind of flown under the radar. I think some people forgot about this. But Merrick Garland this weekend came forward with an announcement about what those investigations actually found about the Minneapolis Police Department. I think you're going to want to hear this. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Here today to announce the findings of that investigation. I am also announcing that the Justice Department, the City of Minneapolis, and the MPD have agreed in principle to negotiate towards a consent decree. Since opening the investigation, the Justice Department has engaged in a comprehensive review of MPD's policies, training, supervision, and use of force investigations. Our review focused on MPD as a whole, not on the actions of any individual officer. We observed many MPD officers who did their difficult work with professionalism, courage, and respect. But the patterns and practices we observed made what happened to George Floyd possible. As one city leader told us, quote, "These systemic issues didn't just occur on May 25th, 2020. There were instances like that were being reported by the community long before that."
I just want to pause here to point out something. The gentleman who was standing here to Merrick Garland's right, this is the mayor of Minneapolis. Now, there was a lot of finger pointing in reference to him because as mayor, you can actually demote police officers and you can fire police officers. And so there was a lot of people looking at him in such a way of, how did you even let this continue? Because it wasn't just about George Floyd. There had been several incidents that have happened in reference to excessive force to citizens in Minneapolis that the mayor just seemed to overlook or didn't handle it in the way that he should have. Now, this is very similar to what Pete Buttigieg experienced as mayor of South Bend, Indiana. There was also corruption and excessive force in that police department in South Bend. And there were community residents that rose up and questioned Mayor Pete at that time and asked him why he didn't make decisions in reference to demoting the right people instead of demoting the wrong people, the police officers who came forward to talk about the discrimination and the injustice that was happening. That was the individual that Mayor Pete chose to demote instead of the ones who were committing those incidents. So I just want to point to you, as the mayor of Minneapolis, how do you feel to have to stand there next to the attorney general as he goes through all of these incidents that they have discovered through their investigation from your police department in your city?
The Department of Justice has concluded that there is reasonable cause to believe that the Minneapolis Police Department and the city of Minneapolis engaged in a pattern or practice of conduct that violates the First and Fourth Amendments of the United States Constitution. There is also reasonable cause to believe that they engage in conduct that violates Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Safe Streets Act, and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Specifically, we found that MPD and the city of Minneapolis engages in a pattern or practice of using excessive force, unlawfully discriminating against Black and Native American people in enforcement activities, violating the rights of people engaged in protected speech, and discriminating against people with behavioral disabilities and responding to them in crisis.
So it wasn't just discrimination against African Americans. There was also discrimination against indigenous people in Minneapolis and also people with disabilities. So when I tell you, you can't just fire one police officer, you can't just arrest one police officer. So convicting Derek Chauvin, that's just taking a branch off the tree. You have to pull up the tree from the roots and you have to plant a new tree. Otherwise, these issues still continue to happen.
I will discuss each finding in somewhat greater detail. First, we found that the Minneapolis Police Department routinely uses excessive force, often when no force is necessary, including unjust, deadly force and unreasonable use of tasers.
I just want to reiterate this. The police department in Minneapolis was using excessive force oftentimes when it was not warranted. It is a culture of behavior. The whole system is corrupt.
MPD officers discharge firearms at people without assessing whether the person presents any threat, let alone a threat that would justify deadly force. For example, in 2017, an MPD officer shot and killed an unarmed woman who he said had, quote, spooked him when she approached his squad car. The woman had called 911, to report a possible sexual assault in a nearby alley.
So this is just another example of someone who actually sought out help from the police and they became a victim of police brutality.
We also found that MPD officers routinely disregard the safety of people in their custody. Our review found numerous incidents in which MPD officers responded to a person's statement that they could not breathe with the version of, "You can breathe, you're talking right now." We also found that MPD officers failed to intervene to prevent unreasonable use of force by other officers. Indeed, as outlined in our report, years before he killed George Floyd, Derek Chauvin used excessive force on other occasions in which multiple MPD officers stood by and did not stop him.
That was a culture of behavior that police department had.
Second, we found that MPD unlawfully discriminates against Black and Native American people in its enforcement activities, including the use of force following stops. Based on our review of the data, MPD officers stop, search, and then use force against people who are Black and Native American at disproportionate rates.
You didn't have to do an investigation to find that out, Merrick Garland. This is something that Black people and Indigenous people have been complaining about for a long time. You didn't really have to do an investigation to come to that conclusion, but here we are. And this is also one of the reasons why I disagree with police officers making traffic stops. Because once they stop you, they can try to look for anything else. They can plant drugs in your car, which has happened before. Police have been caught on camera doing that in Baltimore, Maryland. They should have never been involved in traffic stops to begin with.
The data showed, for example, that MPD stopped Black and Native American people nearly 6 times more often than white people in situations that did not result in arrest or citation, given their shares of the population.
But no, when we tell people, when we've said before that Black people are being stopped at alarming rates, sometimes for no reason. When we tell people these stories, they say, well, maybe it was all in your head. Maybe you were driving too fast. Maybe you were driving too slow. Maybe you shouldn't have had this. Maybe you shouldn't have done that. It's all our fault. Leaving out the fact that police officers were heavily stopping Black people and Indigenous people, not just in Minneapolis, but across this country. This happens on a regular. And then they wondered why people called to defund the police. You are assuming that the police are going to do what is just, what is right. That you're only going to stop someone if they're speeding. You're only going to stop someone if they run a stoplight. They would never just stop someone because of the color of their skin. There was too much trust in the hands of the mayors of these cities, in the governors of these states, and in the president of this country. Too much trust in the police force. And then you also have to understand, and Mr. Mayor here isn't going to tell you, but a lot of these politicians are heavily endorsed by the police unions. Heavily endorsed.
We found several incidents in which MPD officers were not held accountable for racist conduct until there was a public outcry. For example, after MPD officers stopped a car carrying 4 Somali American teens, one officer told the teens, quote, "Do you remember what happened in Black Hawk Down when we killed a bunch of your folk? I'm proud of that. We did."
Listen to this again. This is coming from a police officer, and he said this to 4 Somali Americans.
Stopped a car carrying 4 Somali American teens. One officer told the teens, quote, "Do you remember what happened in Black Hawk Down when we killed a bunch of your folk? I'm proud of that. We didn't finish the job over there. If we had, you guys wouldn't be over here right now."
I hope everybody takes in that statement and thinks about that for just a second. Because here's what I want you to understand. So Minneapolis does have, there's a Somali American population in Minneapolis. I actually had a journalist who's a Somali American come onto the show when he was talking about that as well, along with things that are happening in his home country of Somalia. If you have someone who is in a position of power and has a gun and a badge, and they make that kind of statement towards you, what are you supposed to do? Do you go to the police officers, other ones, and tell them, this police officer just said this to me? What are they going to do? They're all on the same team. They all back each other. They're friends. And they protect the union. What do you do? A complete abuse of power. You had police officers threatening Somali Americans in Minneapolis, and the mayor just stands here like, Mayor Garland opened the speech telling you of an incident in 2017. George Floyd wasn't the first. And you, whatever criticism you have about George Floyd past, that is irrelevant. It is irrelevant when you look at the fact that these police officers were seeking out minority groups to terrorize them, to arrest them, to beat them, to kill them. The entire criminal justice system is inherently racist, and you cannot fix that by arresting Derek Chauvin and sending him to jail. You cannot take a branch off the tree and expect the tree to be okay. You have to pull the tree up from the roots, and you have to plant a new tree. You have to tear this police system, has to be torn down. You have to rebuild something that is new and something that is better for the people. You cannot trust these officers or these police departments to do the right damn thing.
As everyone no doubt knows, this is a reference to the 1990s raid by American Special Forces in Mogadishu. Such conduct is deeply disturbing, and it erodes the community's trust in law enforcement. Third, we found that MPD violates the rights of people engaged in protected speech, including by retaliating against protesters as well as members of the press.
Duh. You didn't see these police officers push protesters on the ground. And I'm not talking about violent. I'm talking about peaceful protesters. There was video footage of police officers walking up to them and pushing them on the ground. The elderly gentleman in Buffalo, New York, where police officers pushed him to the ground and he hit his head on the freaking pavement. You had to do an investigation to figure this out. The video footage was right in front of you, Mayor Garland.
For example, on May 30th, 2020, MPD officers encountered journalists who were sheltering at a gas station. One officer approached a journalist who was filming while holding up his press credential and shouting, "I'm press." The officer forcefully pushed the journalist's head to the pavement, and when the journalist held up his press credential again, an MPD sergeant pepper sprayed him in the face and walked away. Fourth, we found that MPD, along with the city, discriminates against people with behavioral health disabilities when responding to calls for assistance.
And that's exactly why we continue to say that police officers should not respond to mental health crisis situations. They are not trained to deal with that. There are people who are trained to deal with those types of situations. There are mental health counselors. There are mental health, therapists that do know how to handle people that have those issues. You send a police officer into that type of situation, they don't know that the person that's standing in front of them may have schizophrenia, may be bipolar, may be autistic. They don't know. And here's the thing. Even if they don't know, there have been multiple times that I've seen video footage of a bystander or friend trying to explain to them, don't bother him. He has such and such illness. and the police officers will go after him anyway. This is another thing that police officers should not respond to: traffic stops and mental health crisis.
Assistant Attorney General Clark will discuss these findings in further detail. To the credit of MPD and city leaders, some important changes have already been instituted. Those include prohibiting all types of neck restraints and banning no-knock search warrants. But as the report outlines, there is more work to be done. The Justice Department is recommending 28 remedial measures that provide a starting framework to improve public safety, build community trust, and comply with the Constitution and federal law. As I noted at the outset, in an important step toward reform, the City of Minneapolis and MPD have signed an agreement in principle with the Department of Justice. This agreement commits the city and MPD to work with the Justice Department, the community, police officers, and other stakeholders to address the problems that we have identified.
The problem with this is Merrick Garland still believes that this can be reformed. It cannot. I don't care that he signed a contract with the city of Minneapolis. What about all the other cities in this country? Merrick Garland, you have a president and presidents before him that have continued to say we need to fund the police. We need to give them more money. Joe Biden has blood on his hands. Donald Trump has blood on his hands. Bill Clinton has blood on his hands. Now, at least Bill Clinton will acknowledge that he fucked up. He's actually acknowledged that. Joe Biden still refuses to acknowledge that the crime bill was a disaster and it should have never happened. You is these people, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, Donald Trump. Throw in Barack Obama too, because he also militarized the police. It's these people who actually encourage the behavior, guys. The crime bill. Let's actually implement legislation that is going to make it okay for police officers to target Black men in Black neighborhoods, and let's punish them more harshly than white men who have the same crime. Joe Biden has blood on his hands. Bill Clinton has blood on his hands. Let's keep it real. This little contract that Merrick Garland has with the city of Minneapolis, that don't mean anything to me. Nothing. Until you talk about tearing down that system and rebuilding something that actually shows policing as community, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. You don't need cops to do traffic stops. You don't need cops to intervene in mental health crisis situations. Cops shouldn't be giving people parking tickets. Just take it all away. No-knock warrants should have never been a thing in the first damn place. How many people had to die for them to finally implement something against that? Because the reality is, it's not just about George Floyd. There are many other George Floyds that you don't even know about because their story didn't make mainstream news. These are only the people we know about. But you want the community to trust the police. Why would you trust them? Especially when you have a police union that is there to protect the police at all costs. There is no accountability. Just because Derek Chauvin was found guilty, that's one out of how many? The police officer who killed Oscar Grant shot him in the back while Oscar Grant was laying on the ground on his stomach in handcuffs. Shot him in the back. That police officer served 1 year. Oscar Grant never gets his life back. And Oscar Grant was unarmed. So don't even come at me with this, man. This is 2023. This has been going on for decades. Century. This goes all the way back to slave patrols. This is not a new thing. And the legislation that has been implemented, regardless if it's Democrat or Republican president in the White House, the legislation that has been implemented continues to back the police state. You know why? They're afraid of us. They won't tell you that, but they are. Because there are more of us than there are of the police. They are scared, terrified. The number of people that showed up in the streets to protest for George Floyd, the number of people across the world, they don't want that to happen again. If they were serious, if Merrick Garland was serious, you wouldn't have a cop city being built right now in Atlanta, goddamn it. So don't even come at me with that. When's that gonna happen? When is Merrick Garland gonna make a visit to Atlanta? Get out of here.
And this agreement commits all parties to the negotiation to negotiate a legally binding consent decree with an independent monitor. We are grateful to city and MPD leaders for their shared commitment to addressing these deep-seated challenges. I also want to take this opportunity to address the officers of the Minneapolis Police Department. Your profession is essential. The work you do on a daily basis is extremely difficult and often very dangerous. Your responsibilities are enormous and could not be more important. You are asked to keep your community safe, to uphold the rule of law, and to ensure equal justice under law. For you to succeed, your police department must provide you with clear policies and consistent training that explain and reinforce constitutional boundaries and responsibilities. It must give you the support you need to do your jobs safely and effectively. And its supervisors and chain of command must enable you to achieve the highest professional standards. This agreement is an important step forward toward providing you with the support and resources you need to do your job effectively and lawfully.
They've had plenty of resources and support to do their job the right way. That's an excuse. Merrick Garland won't come out and just publicly say, guess what, folks? Turns out the police department in Minneapolis is racist. Won't say that, though. So I don't even think that Merrick Garland is serious. Give me a break. He won't even free Julian Assange. Give me a break. Give me a break. That's to cover his ass. That's what that's about. Make sure you share this with people. A lot of people are not covering this story. People need to hear it. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button. That helps me with the algo. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to some of the comments here and we'll move on to the next story. A hot mess. Lambert says Blackpink endorsed Cornel West. I'm not familiar with Blackpink. Do you mean Code Pink? I have to double check that. Thank you for the super sticker, Aberdeen71. Thank you for the super chat, Roy. Maconha should be legalized in Brazil for recreational use. Interesting. Corey says, is the DOJ going to acknowledge that this is basically the same in any larger city police department? Exactly, Corey. This situation is not isolated to Minneapolis. Raul says, Sabs, you were right. Trinidad was debating invading Haiti today in Parliament. I told you that was coming. Thank you for the super chat, Eric. At the end of the day, the police still maintain their primary function of protecting the interests of the capitalist class. That's right. They protect profit. They protect wealth. They protect power. Police don't protect poor people. They don't protect Black people. They protect wealth and capital. And thank you for the super sticker, Mikey G. Thank you so much. Okay, we are moving on to something a little bit different. If you have not heard, Joe Biden is having a very difficult time at the polls. Donald Trump has passed him significantly. That was recent. So the Biden administration is pulling out all the stops to get people to come out and support Joe Biden because they know he is struggling so badly. And they have even gone as far to get the unions to come out in support of the Biden administration. I can't make this up. Listen to this. The Biden-Harris administration is proudly pro-worker, pro-public education, and pro-democracy. And the AFT union is proud to endorse Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the 2024 Democratic primary. Here are our members sharing why. So first of all, they're not pro-worker. They crushed a railroad strike. That includes the regressives as well that are a part of Congress. They crushed a railroad strike. They're not pro-public education. They're sending more money to Ukraine than they're allocating for sending towards any type of education or social programs in this country. So this is BS, obviously. But let me tell you what they've already done. They have managed to get the unions to come out in support. They have videos, they have articles. This is a hot mess, you guys. You got to see it to believe it.
President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris really care about people. They get the importance of workers having a voice and students having real opportunity. They are unabashedly pro-labor and pro-public education.
Already, this is giving me infomercial vibes. You ever watch those infomercials late at night? This is already giving me infomercial vibes. Buy this and you too will be able to do this in less than 5 minutes. How are they pro-worker? How are they pro-worker when they crushed a railroad strike? Give me a break. How are they pro-work? They blocked the railroad workers from getting sick pay. Now, some say, well, that was the Senate. Joe Biden could have stepped in there and he chose not to. Chose not to. Let's go on. I have something else to tell you about this.
I'm Randy Weingarten. And the 1.7 million members of the AFT, representing public school teachers and school staff, higher education faculty and campus staff, nurses and healthcare professionals, and public employees across the country, all of us are proud to support President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris for the Democratic nomination in 2024.
I'm Connie, and I'm an OR tech.
I'm Crystal, a paraprofessional from Chicago Public Schools.
I'm Scott. I'm a community college librarian in Lancaster, California.
I'm Michelle. I work at the Montana Department of Transportation.
I'm Erica Bray, Administrative Assistant for Detroit Public Schools.
My name is Carmen, and
Pause. I've already seen Chicago Public Schools and Detroit Public Schools. Don't even get me started. I worked in education. Chicago Public Schools, not doing too well. Detroit Public Schools, not doing too well. How many times did the teachers have to go on strike in Chicago? How many schools have been closed in Detroit? How much did they pay these people to say this, guys? Let's be real.
I am a proud New York City middle school social studies teacher, and I support Joe Biden for president in 2024.
Joe Biden got the first major infrastructure bill passed in decades. It's going to build roads, bridges, water and energy infrastructure, broadband, and more.
What does the infrastructure bill? I'm sorry, let me go back. What does the infrastructure bill have to do with workers right now? Pro-worker. The same infrastructure bill that made loopholes for Joe Manchin. That same bill. This is just, if people fall for this, they are just not paying attention.
Decades. It's going to build roads, bridges, water and energy infrastructure, broadband, and more.
I'm voting for Joe Biden because he's the most labor-friendly president that I can remember.
Throughout.
Really? How old is this gentleman? Let's go back. Hold on. How old do you think he is? He's obviously older than me. He looks like he could probably be my dad, around my dad's age. Actually, might be a little bit older than my dad. The first labor-friendly president that he can remember. Let's go on.
Labor-friendly president that I can remember.
Throughout his administration, Joe Biden has signed executive orders supporting women's reproductive health, particularly after the Dobbs decision.
What does that have to do with workers. Do you guys see what's happening here? She's talking about women's reproductive health. Okay. The Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Joe Biden told people to come out and vote in November for the Democratic Party so that they can codify Roe v. Wade into law. Then after that said, we're not going to codify Roe v. Wade into law. He supported women's reproductive health. What does that have to do with the union and being pro-worker? Do you see what they're doing here? They don't have much to say about the pro-worker situation. So they're trying to mention all these other things to make Joe Biden look like he's doing a good job.
Signed executive orders supporting women's reproductive health, particularly after the Dobbs decision.
I see how President Biden's Medicaid expansion has worked wonders for the patients I help here in my hospital.
The same Medicaid that the same Medicaid, are you going to leave out the fact that he kicked people off of Medicaid when he overturned the emergency status of the pandemic? What about all those people that just lost insurance? So you see what happens here, right? The nurses union, the teachers union, they got them to come together to make these statements. That's mainly who most of these people are. They got them to come together to make this statement, to make it seem like Joe Biden is pro-worker. Isn't that something?
I'm voting for Joe Biden because of the public service loan forgiveness, the African American community support.
Public loan, what? Look, none of these things are happening, people. None of these things are happening. This woman is reading a script.
I'm voting for Joe Biden because of the public service loan forgiveness, the African American community support.
What African American community support? They don't give you any examples. What did he do?
And I want him to finish the job that he started.
I'm voting for Biden because he fights for what our schools and communities need.
How? No examples.
Let's help Joe and Kamala finish the job of standing up for what families need, making government work for all Americans and building our economy from the bottom up and the middle out so everyone can get a fair shot.
People getting a fair shot right now are not in this country. Billions of dollars have gone to Ukraine. Billions of dollars not coming to us. Over $800 billion in that defense budget. Not to the people, though. All of these people reading the script, guys. Reading the script. Doesn't even seem real. It seems forced and fake. Now, Case Study QB actually had a video about this too that I also want to share, where it says the AFL-CIO endorses President Biden in 2024, a year ahead of schedule. So you see, they don't have anything to sell in reference to Joe Biden. So they said, let us go to the unions. And I'm pretty sure they probably talked to the union leaders, not the other members. Let us go to them and get them to publicly endorse Joe Biden right now. Do it now. Do it now. Do it now. Because he's already losing in the polls. Pathetic.
Today's 2024 presidential news is that the AFL-CIO, America's largest union and a powerful electoral force, endorsed Joe Biden's re-election campaign a year ahead of schedule, saying in part, Joe Biden is the most pro-union president in our lifetimes. From bringing manufacturing jobs home to America to protecting our pensions and making historic investments in infrastructure, clean energy, and education, we've never seen a president work so tirelessly to rebuild our economy from the bottom up and from the middle out.
No examples. Joe Biden is the most pro-union president of our lifetimes. How? How is it pro-union to prevent the railroad workers from getting guaranteed sick pay? How is it pro-union to prevent the railroad workers from going on strike? You know, they didn't go to the railroad workers and ask them for an endorsement because they know better. They know better. Give me a break. Even time you sit up here and you have DSA members, Democratic Socialists, being strike breakers, being scabs. Give me a break, people. No examples. protecting our pensions and making historic investments in infrastructure and giving leeway to Joe Manchin under infrastructure. They're not going to mention that. Clean energy, but you sat up there and you allowed for Joe Manchin to have leeway to continue to profit off the coal industry. That's not clean. And education. They give you no examples of what he's done for education. We've never seen a president work so tirelessly to rebuild our economy from the bottom up and the middle out. That's from Liz Scholler, the president. You see what I'm saying? This is coming from the people at the top of these unions. Where are the union members? The rank and file has spoken. This is exactly why I continue to say that unionization cannot be the end game. It is a good starting point, but the end game should be worker co-ops. That should be the end game. Unions have union leaders, rank and file, that sometimes go against their own members. We saw that with the railroad workers. They have leaders who speak for the entire union. Where's everybody else on this statement? This is why this cannot be the end game. I'm not here to tell you that unions are bad. I think it's good to have some type of protections there for the workers. But the problem that we are coming up against in this country, particularly over the strikes that have been happening over the past year and a half, is that now it has gotten to the point where even the Supreme Court has decided to get involved in reference to who can strike and when and where. The unions don't have as much say-so as you would think. We're learning that the federal government can still come in and crush them. But if you have a worker co-op, now you own a piece of the company. When you're a union member, you don't own a piece of the company. You still have to answer to the beck and call of the CEO. And this is why the railroads, we called for this. There needs to be nationalization of the railroads. These people need to have more say.
In 2020, union households backed Joe Biden by 14 points over Donald Trump, despite Donald Trump's rhetoric about international trade. President Biden is going to rally with union members tomorrow afternoon in Philadelphia. It caps off a week of wins in the economic arena for the White House. Inflation expectations came in cooler. That means consumers are more optimistic about prices in the near future, which caused the Fed to take a surprise pass this week on once again raising interest rates to try to lower inflation. Doesn't mean they're not going to do it again, but they didn't do it this week.
Now, Common Dreams actually wrote an article about this. Common Dreams is pretty good on labor. Oh, I didn't put that there. I am so sorry. I think I forgot the Common Dreams article. I did. I'm going to have to pull that up. But in the meantime, one of the things I want to show you why they are heavily trying to get as many people as possible to come out and support Joe Biden is because look at this. Now, this is a problem. The Democratic Party decided to make South Carolina the first primary state or early state in the primaries instead of Iowa and then New Hampshire. They've bumped South Carolina up. And I told you, they said it was about diversity. I said that's BS. It was really about diversity. A state like Maryland or New Jersey or even Texas, they would have pushed for, right? Those states are more diverse than South Carolina. I've lived in South Carolina, so I know what I'm talking about. It was not about that. It was about pushing up the state that really put Joe Biden across the line. Everything changed after South Carolina in 2020 in the Democratic primaries. Bernie Sanders won New Hampshire. He won Nevada. We're even saying that he won Iowa, even though Pete announced early, and it turns out that he was incorrect. And we said that even back then. And then all of a sudden, things changed when it came to South Carolina. Joe Biden received the endorsement of Jim Clyburn, and we know what happened from there. That's what this is about. That being said, though, Iowa and New Hampshire are not backing down. Iowa and New Hampshire have decided they are still going to hold it first, as they usually would have. What that means is that Joe Biden would not be on the ballot in Iowa and New Hampshire. And that means that Biden could lose the first two 2024 contests to RFK Jr. This is a reality, folks. They didn't really think this through. President Biden is almost certain to be Democrats' pick for president in 2024, but he might not win the first two contests of the primary season if they're in the traditional first to vote states of Iowa and New Hampshire. Biden's team is indicating he won't be on the ballots in those states if they vote before South Carolina, his choice to have the first primary. Democrats in Iowa and New Hampshire could defy Biden and move ahead with their contest, even as the party warns it will strip them of their national convention delegates if they jump the gun. That sets up a scenario in which RFK Jr. or another long shot Democrat could win those states and embarrass the president. All the things that could happen. These are some of the things that they weren't thinking about at that point in time. Now, some say, how is it that they will be able to do this? There's a fine that New Hampshire and Iowa would have to pay, but they seem to be okay with paying that fine. New Hampshire and Iowa are not happy. They're not happy about the fact that this decision was made by the Democratic Party and they've been kind of knocked out of their spot. They're not happy about that. And they've been vocal about it. So they've decided, you know what? You're not going to tell us what to do. We're going to do it anyway. Now, I have that article from Common Dreams because they talked about the labor union supporting Joe Biden as well. In unprecedented show of solidarity, major labor unions endorsed Biden for 2024. Just want to read a little bit here. 17 unions on Friday endorsed Democratic U.S. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris for re-election in 2024. During the 2020 campaign and since taking office, Biden has pledged to be the most pro-union president, leading the most pro-union administration in American history. He has won praise for various appointments, including Julie Su for Labor Secretary, which still lacks U.S. Senate approval, and actions to improve the lives of exploited workers. Although Biden also has at time angered organized labor, particularly in December when he signed a congressional resolution preventing a nationwide rail strike as industry workers were fighting for paid sick leave. AFL-CIO President Liz Shuler still stressed Friday that there's absolutely no question that Joe Biden is the most pro-union president in our lifetimes. Let's go on here. I want to go down to this part. Along with the AFL and CIO unions individually endorsing Biden-Harris campaign include the Actors Equity Association, the American Federation of Government Employees, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, American Federation of the Teachers. See, I told you they got the teachers on board. Communication Workers of America, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, International Union of Operating Engineers, International Association of Bridge, Structural, Ornamental, and Reinforcing Iron Workers, Labor's International Union of North America, and National Nurses United. To the nurses union, I have to say this. How do you back a president that doesn't even support everyone having health care? Make it make sense. How do you support a president that doesn't even support everyone having health care in this country? These aren't these members speaking for this. This is rank and file. That's what this is about. Now I want to go to this piece here. There's the other unions coming forward. There is a crowded field for the 2024 Republican presidential primary, but twice impeached, twice indicted former President Donald Trump, who just turned 77, is leading the polls. Despite arguments that the U.S. Constitution bars him from ever holding elected office again for inciting what happened in January, on the Democratic side, the 80-year-old Biden incumbent faces a pair of long-shot candidates, Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr. Biden's new labor endorsements were intentionally announced ahead of the Saturday event at the Pennsylvania Convention Center in Philadelphia, which will be the president's first rally since confirming in April that he is seeking a second term. See what I told you? Calling Biden and Harris the most pro-labor, pro-public education leaders of our country has seen in modern history. AFT President Randy Weingarten, that's who you saw in the first video there. This weekend, the entire labor movement is joining together in an unprecedented show of strength and support to harness the collective power of working people determined to move this country in the direction of freedom, justice, and opportunity for all. Make it make sense. The minimum wage has not been increased. $15 minimum wage was struck down. You don't have health care for everyone in this country. But here's the Democratic Party trying to co-opt the labor movements. And this is exactly why I continue to say the unions, any type of labor organizing and movement cannot work within the Democratic Party. They co-opt the message. And that is clearly what has happened here. Why aren't these unions trying to work with an organization like Workers Strike Back? An organization that is about the workers. Because the Democratic Party has already co-opted these unions. That's why. You see why? People get mad at me when I say this. No. You cannot organize with them. If you're trying to do labor, you cannot organize under these political parties. You cannot organize under the Republican Party. You cannot organize under the Democratic Party. This is why I say it, because they co-opt the message. They co-opt these organizations. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some infiltration here. And then you don't get what you're supposed to get as a worker. Minimum wage hasn't been increased. And the people on these videos that are part of these unions, they want you to believe that everything is A-OK. Railroad workers strike, crushed, but they want you to believe that everything is going great for the workers. People kicked off unemployment. People being evicted still. But they want you to believe that everything it's going great under this administration. It is not. They're going to use this talking point about creating all these jobs. They like to use that one. They like that one a lot. But they never tell you what the jobs are. They never tell you if they're full-time, part-time, if they're temp positions, contract positions. They don't tell you. They never tell you if these jobs offer healthcare benefits, including dental, by the way. They don't tell you any of that. They just say we created jobs. So they had to do this because Joe Biden is struggling so badly, so badly. And someone made a funny video about this. Now you got to see this. This is how bad it is with Joe Biden.
So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
Presenting the Best of Biden collection, now on home video. Now you can enjoy all your favorite wacky moments from America's senile old granddad.
Well, you know, gay bathhouses and everything. It's all about round-the-clock sex. It's all, come on, man.
Including sniffing a baby, awkward hugs, numbers are hard.
Go to Joe 30330.
Corn Pop.
And Corn Pop was a bad dude.
Racism.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
Stupid troops.
Clap for that, you stupid bastard. You stupid bastard.
Blank Stare. Blank Stare Part 2. Chris is Chuck.
All right, Chuck. Thank you very much.
All right, it's Chris, but anyway.
I just did Chris.
And many more.
Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night, the phone. Make sure the kids hear word.
But wait, call within the next 10 minutes and receive a free copy of Kamala's Kooky Cackles. That's right, 6 full hours of ear-piercing cackles that the whole family can enjoy. Here's how to order.
If Joe Biden wins, got to add some humor in there, guys. If Joe Biden wins, I believe that he would resign that first year. And guess what, folks? Kamala Harris would be your president. Is that what you want? Do you trust Kamala Harris to handle foreign policy? Something to think about. Thank you so much for this, NK. Thank you for the super chat. AFT member here. Your 100% leadership are co-opted good Democrats. Rank and file voted for Bernie. Thank you so much for sending that, NK. You see what I mean, guys? And they're speaking for the entire union. Thank you for the super chat, Amber. A vote for Biden is a vote for elder abuse. Thank you, Eric. Trust and believe Sabby as a Florida public school teacher. These two parties are such subhuman garbage. Joey says, I got $5 on that. These are all union stewards, and the union leadership hammered this appointed endorsement. There you go. Joe says, Dems always going to lean on black people. Biden said we are a monolith. That too. That too. So pay attention, folks. They're already doing it. Already doing it. Okay, let's go ahead and move to our next story. Cornel West. So I interviewed Cornel West recently. I hope you guys have enjoyed those clips. Like Eric did a really good job clipping up different questions and just putting them out as solo clips. So people don't have to go back through the whole interview to find what did Dr. West say about this issue or that issue. You just have the clip that you can go to, and there it is. So there's your answers to that question. But Cornel West recently went on to, I don't know what this is. Why is that there? Oh yeah, this isn't the Fox one. I put the wrong one here, but we're going to go through both. We're going to do both. I'll find the Fox one. Eric, can you go on Twitter and type in Cornel West Fox? Because I want to get that one too. But I'll go ahead and play this one. So Cornel West had 2 interviews. He had the one on CNN and he had the one on Fox News. I'm going to start with the CNN one first, and then we'll get to Fox News, because this is going to prove a point when people say that you should run third party or independent because it's not going to get the attention from mainstream media. And I always argued that if you had someone who had a big name that ran third party, that could change. Just like if Jesse Ventura would have decided to run in 2020, that could have changed a lot of things. And so now we see that this is definitely the case. Someone who's well-known like Cornel West immediately got attention from mainstream media when he announced. Immediately he was on mainstream media. So let's start off with these clips here from CNN when he talks about the poor and the working class, and then we'll move on to Fox News.
The growing Republican field for president is dominating the headlines, but other candidates are hoping the crowded field paves the way for another choice. The total number of Republican candidates right now stands at 11. 2 Democrats are challenging Biden for the White House, RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson. And then there is Cornel West. He announced last week that he's going to run on a third-party ticket. Now he is switching parties. Cornel West joins me now. Thank you so much for joining me, sir. You moved from the People's Party to the Green Party this week, and it makes you much more likely you're going to be on the ballot in a majority of states. Is that why you switched?
Well, I just want to make sure that poor and working people are at the very center of this discussion. But I want to begin by wishing you a happy birthday.
Thank you, sir.
Indeed. But what the problem is, we have a two-party system that doesn't highlight the precious poor and working people. I'm thinking of Brother Michael and Brother Eddie right now in Rankin County, Mississippi. Neither party speaks to his situation. We got brown brothers and sisters in the borough. We got poor whites in West Virginia. Neither party, both parties tied to Wall Street, Pentagon, both parties so obsessed with the professional managerial class, they lose sight of poor people and working people. Yep. The best of America, and that's what my campaign is about, my dear Sister Dana. I want to introduce America to the best of itself, the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and Rabbi Heschel and Dorothy Day and Edward Said and Grace Lee Boggs and Louisa Marino. We've had some major voices concerned about poor and working people, not just here, but the militarism around the world and the victims of that militarism around the world. And so we're going to have a robust conversation in this presidential political season.
Dana always looks uncomfortable. It seems like no matter who she interviews, this woman never looks comfortable.
You have gotten the question many times. I've heard you being asked about being a spoiler, and you reject that argument, a spoiler for Joe Biden in 2024. But I want to give our viewers a little bit of history. In 2016, Jill Stein was on the ballot for the Green Party, and Donald Trump ended up winning in a nail biter, particularly in some of the key states that you're looking at right now. I'm putting up on the screen just so you know.
So this is what they're trying to do. Now they're trying to put fear into the American people. Oh, Jill Stein caused Donald Trump to win. No, Donald Trump won because he spoke to people in the Rust Belt, and particularly he spoke to the needs of the people in the Rust Belt, just as Bernie Sanders did. But she wants to bring up 2016, and she wants to leave out the fact that Bernie Sanders won every county in West Virginia, and the superdelegates decided to give West Virginia to Hillary Clinton anyway. Someone who did not speak to the needs of the people in the Rust Belt. So when you look at these states here, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that's what you have to keep in mind. So this is Dana doing the job of the establishment and the Democratic Party to try to warn the viewers, well, you're just going to help people get Donald Trump.
Number of votes that.
And we'll go on to the next part here, because these are in different little segments here.
Donald Trump's margin there. What's to say, despite your convictions and your argument about the two parties not being the way to go, what's to say what I just showed on the screen won't happen with Cornel West on the ballot and not Jill Stein?
I mean, one, that, my dear sister Jill Stein, who got 1.07% of the vote, my dear brother Ralph Nader, who got more, he got about 4%, but you don't look to the weakest candidates as a full explanation as to why you lose. Sister Hillary Clinton lost because she was not a good candidate. She didn't go to Wisconsin, and you know even better than all of us all the various factors that go into why she also didn't lose, not just that one factor. So the idea of putting all the responsibility on the candidates who get the fewest votes compared to the other big two is just a way of rationalizing a two-party system that has become more and more outdated and antiquated, both tied to big money and big military, and they don't allow us to speak to 60% of our fellow citizens who are wrestling every day trying to put money on the table and waiting for the next check, and the gross wealth inequality continues, and the military budget continues to expand. We saw this with Brother Biden. But I do want to say this, though, just quickly, that this campaign is also about getting beyond hatred and revenge. You see, I don't hate Brother Trump. I hate his lies and his gangster neo-fascism. I don't hate Brother Biden. I hate his hypocrisy, and I hate his milquetoast neoliberal policy. And we have to be able to engage in a public conversation. It gets beyond eye for an eye and this vicious kind of revenge, so that it reinforces the distrust and the paranoia. And that's a immeasurable dimension. That's an invisible dimension of my campaign that's going to set a different kind of tone of what my brother Cliff West called a paradigm shift in American politics. 'Cause I'm a jazz man in the world of politics, and the jazz man is always about improvisation, always about compassion, always about style, and always about a smile.
So that piece I think is important for people to understand. You know, it's not about hatred, so to speak. It's about the policies, at least it is for Dr. West. Now they go on here.
You made the arguments during the 2020 campaign similar to what I'm hearing you make now when you were backing other candidates, Bernie Sanders to be precise. But you did end up voting for Joe Biden because you said 4 more years of Donald Trump could be worse. Why isn't that the case for you this time around?
Well, I learned from my very dear brother, Bernie Sanders. You know, I have a very profound respect for him, even as we disagree on a number of things. But I'm thoroughly convinced he was treated unjustly. I'm thoroughly convinced that the corporate wing of the Democratic Party will always use the progressive wing as a kind of window dressing. The progressive wing will never triumph. We almost triumphed, and then the neoliberals came together after the call by Obama to Amy and Pete and the others. And therefore, I'm thoroughly convinced that first, pushing back Trump, that's exactly what I tried to do, part of an anti-fascist coalition. But then I began to see you never, ever defeat fascism with a milquetoast neoliberalism that doesn't have vision and passion. The only way you defeat fascism that is coming to America, if we do not fight, is a strong vision, strong passion, and then I'm going, as I've said, to Trump country itself. I'm going to my white brothers and sisters and say, don't scapegoat the most vulnerable, confront the most powerful. There's another way of looking at that.
Well, I want to ask you.
So hold on to that point there where Dr. West mentions fascism and that he's going to Trump country, because I have another clip I'm going to show you from Pasta's interview with Dr. West, where Pasta is actually giving Dr. West a little bit of advice about the rhetoric to use if you are going into Trump country. And I think this is important for people to hear, because let's remember Bernie Sanders also went into, well, at that time it wasn't Trump country, but went into those same areas that Donald Trump went into. So I think this whole idea that these third-party candidates are the reason why we got Donald Trump, it's BS. The reason why we got Donald Trump is because the American people, some of them who had voted for Barack Obama twice, saw that their material conditions were not improving. They saw that their wages were not increasing. They saw that they were still struggling just to get by after we just had a president for 8 years in a row who ran on hope and change and yes, we can. So people have to understand that. And this is where you got to get out of this mindset of this, I'm this blue party mentality or this red party mentality. You have to get out of that mindset and look at the material conditions that are presented before you today. And not just for a party, just because that's the party you're a part of.
Forgive me for interrupting, but I was going to ask you about that because you mentioned to my colleague Jake Tapper that you're going to go to Trump country. What specifically do you think that people who are ardent Trump supporters are going to be receptive to in your message?
The economy, you dummy. See, this is why I could never be on CNN. This is why I could not, there's no way. But like, what kind of question is that? The economy, the inflation, the high gas prices that people had, the wages not increasing. What are you talking about, Dana? This is that partisan mindset to where if you are a Democrat, you can be convinced that whatever the other party wants or needs cannot in any way, shape, or form align with your own needs. And that's actually not true. Both parties support corporate interest. Both parties put the people last. The differences come in a lot of times with the social issues. I even argue about this difference of big government versus little government, because some of the same people who tell me they're against big government, their support funding the police state. That's big government. I think a lot of people have been brainwashed and have been conditioned that you have to be a part of one of these two parties, or else it will be your fault if things don't go the way that it should for the American people. It's not our fault. And I'm here to tell you, as someone who has been a voter for years, it's not our fault. These parties have been bought by these corporations. They've been bought by Wall Street. They've been bought by the military industrial complex. And every time we go out and vote and think that our vote is really going to make a difference, but it's not up to us. I've been telling people this for a long time. These people are handpicked, chosen. The Democratic Party has already told you that Joe Biden is going to be the nominee and there's not going to be any debates. What else more do people need to see to understand that we don't really have as much choice as we think that we do? That's the big part of the problem.
Well, one, I don't believe that they're homogeneous and monolithic. About 1 out of 10 of them voted for Brother Bernie himself. They were looking for an alternative because they see through the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party, talking about justice on the one hand, but tied to big money on the other. And so I want to go back to those folk and recognize when I see a Trump supporter, I don't see a stereotype. I see a human being, many of them who are wounded, and too many of them follow a neo-fascist.
Okay, now we're going to go into this Fox interview. Let me go ahead and grab that link here. Because now you have it so that Dr. West has not just been on to CNN. He's also been on Fox News. So I think people need to see this as well. Now, Laura Ingraham interviewed Dr. West here. CJ, my comrade from RBN, he tweeted this, says Dr. West goes on Fox News. Listen to this.
Oklahoma. He was raised in Sacramento. Even before he finished, he became involved in the civil rights movement. He attended organizing.
Might need a volume booster on this one, Eric. Thank you.
Protests. He finished Harvard in just 3 years, graduating magna cum laude. Then he went on to Princeton, where he got his master's and his PhD. He's taught at Harvard, at Yale, and at Princeton University. He made cameos in 2 Matrix films, but also put out a hip-hop album. And he was frequently a guest on this very show. Having done all that, he's now making a run for the White House.
I enter in the quest for truth. I enter in the quest for justice. And the presidency is just one vehicle to pursue that truth and justice, what I've been trying to do all of my life.
Joining me now, Dr. Cornel West, 2024 presidential candidate for the Green Party. Professor West, it's great to see you tonight. It's really great to have you back on the show. The last time you were here, I think it was as a 2020 Bernie Sanders surrogate. So things have changed a little bit. So, you know, why do you think so many of the... I mean, I was laughing about that. Like Bernie Sanders.
Indeed. No,
seems like
Brother Bernie's my dear brother. But first, I want to thank you for having me on, Sister Laura. Very much so. But no, Bernie got shut down by the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party is so tied to Wall Street, it's so tied to the Pentagon, that I thought it very important to build on the richer legacy that has shaped and molded me. Not just the West family, not just Shiloh Baptist Church on the chocolate side of Sacramento, but the legacies of Martin Luther King Jr. and Rabbi Heschel and Edward Said and Dorothy Day and Grace Lee Boggs. So it's this legacy spills over now into electoral politics, because I'm thoroughly convinced, my dear sister, that the two-party system stands in the way for the empowerment of precious poor people and precious working people. And I am fundamentally committed to the plight of the least of these, not just here and around the world. I'm against the militarism abroad. I'm against the organized greed. I'm against the routinized indifference to the vulnerable, no matter what color they are, no matter what gender, no matter what sexual orientation.
Dr. West, I know you support drawing this Ukraine conflict to a close. And just tonight, the Washington Post is reporting that the Biden administration is giving backing to a plan that would remove barriers to Ukraine's entry into NATO without setting a timeline for its admission. So the Democrat Party is obviously all in, as are many Republicans, not Donald Trump. I don't think Ron DeSantis, but pretty much all the other Republicans are for the U.S. being on the hook for perpetually defending Ukraine from the aggression of any other country. Why is that interventionism, let's focus on the Democrat Party, at the cornerstone now of who they are really in foreign policy. How did that happen and why?
Well, I mean, the Democratic Party has a long history of being committed to wars. Look at, you can go back all the way to Vietnam. But unfortunately, we have to tell the truth. NATO, the promise would be that NATO would not move 1 inch against or toward Russian territory. A few years later, 14 former Soviet countries part of NATO. So that you can imagine any empire, the American empire, the most powerful, and it's, you know the history of invasion and occupation, but you would probably agree that if there were Russian missiles in Mexico, Russian missiles in Canada, it would be blown to smithereens very, very quickly. Why? Because empires behave that way. Now, if you're a radical Democrat, you have a critique of the imperial overlay of your country. That includes organized greed at the top with Wall Street, and it includes the war profiteers.
I would say, Cornel,
I'm in solidarity with the suffering of the Ukrainian people, but we've got to bring that war to a stop, ceasefire, and then proceed diplomatically and transfer some of those funds from the military to investment in jobs and health care and quality education and decent homes.
Dr. West, one thing I'm very curious about, because on these seminal issues, like you and I disagree on a lot, but you and I actually agree on a lot. On the surveillance state, on the perpetual war, on the Wall Street influence in politics. We agree on a lot of things. To me, it seems like you're closer in many ways to populist conservatives on those types of issues than you are the modern Democrat Party. And I know you're running as a Green, but can't you tonight say that Donald Trump did more for African Americans in the inner city with increased real median income, increased entrepreneurial opportunities, criminal justice reform, all the things that he did when he was president, given all the investigations, all the stuff that was happening? Can't you recognize that he actually was doing his best at the time to stand up for disenfranchised people with an economy that was actually growing for the first time?
You see what she's trying to do here, right? You see how she did that pivot? So she mentions the war in Ukraine, right? Because for the most part, it does seem like a lot of people in the Democratic Party are not calling for some type of peace, right? They agree to continue to give Ukraine this blank check, etc. Or they agree that we need to find a way to shut down Russia. So you see what she just did, right? Okay. So she used the issue with the war to pivot to, actually, you may be more aligned with conservatives than the Democratic Party. Okay. So that doesn't really matter, Laura, because to her point, he's running as a Green. He's running as a third party candidate. And if people actually took the time and looked at the Green Party's platform, then they would realize that obviously they're not for these wars. Don't even mention Howie Hawkins. That's a whole other thing. We're not even going to get into that tonight. Okay, I'm just going ahead and mention that now. We're not going to get into that tonight. But that's what people have to understand. So you see what she's trying to do. And then she goes from that to, well, won't you say that Donald Trump did more for Black people and for, you know, these criminal justice reforms and da-da-da. You see how she did that pivot? Remember, it is Fox News. So she's still going to make sure she look out for her base.
For real median income was growing for all demographic groups.
But you have to acknowledge that the grotesque wealth inequality was increasing even as those low unemployment rates were in place. Now, I give him credit for the low unemployment rates, but the problem with Brother Trump, and it's very important to keep in mind, you know, we got to do away with all this hatred and revenge. I don't hate Brother Trump. I hate the lies, and I hate the gangster activity, and I hate the kind of neo-fascist language he uses. When he trashes Muslims, when he trashes, calling Black folk, football players, sons of B-I-T-C-H. No, his language is neo-fascist, and he was still tied to big military, still allowing Wall Street to get away. That's where you and I would disagree. That's where we disagree. But I'll
Cornel,
say this.
The point is that both Joe Biden and Donald Trump back Wall Street. Both of them still support the corporate powers that be. So there's that, Laura.
I don't hate Biden, but I hate Biden's hypocrisy. I hate his neoliberal policies.
Yeah, but the surveillance state that you and I think a lot of conservatives have grown incredibly mistrustful of, and the outsized influence of the Pentagon, they were all turned against Trump. So you have to acknowledge that. Milley, the whole Milley apparatus, they were all.
So you see what she's doing now? She's bringing up another issue where she knows they agree on the surveillance state. Now she's trying to say, so you got to say that Donald Trump, wouldn't you say this? She's trying to get him to publicly admit that Donald Trump was better for the American people than Joe Biden. And then, she could say, oh, well, you're more aligned with the conservatives. You might as well just run as a conservative, see?
All against Trump. All of them. Why were they against Trump if he was a big threat?
It's because that neoliberal apparatus wanted to retain its status, and Trump came in as a critic from the right wing.
Right.
And that's where the neo-fascism comes in, by trashing the immigrants, trashing too many precious gay brothers and lesbian sisters and so forth.
I know that's your line.
He didn't say too many nice things. He didn't say too many nice things about my and even the people to support. But I can tell you this. As a presidential candidate, I'm going straight into Brother Trump's country, and I'm going to tell the brothers and sisters of all colors, I want you not to scapegoat the most vulnerable. I want you to confront the most powerful. That's Wall Street. That's Silicon Valley. That's the war profiteers of Pentagon.
Yeah.
That's
See, now she has to cut him off because he's starting to call out the 1%. Because that's the way this two-party system works, right? Like the Democratic Party, they want you to hate the Trump-like peeps. They want you to hate the Republicans. The Republicans want you to hate the Democrats. And that's how it works. As long as you're hating someone else, like they want you to hate the people who are actually scapegoats. They want you to hate the immigrants. They want you to hate Black people. They want you to hate people that are disabled. Like they want you to hate everybody else except for the people that, and I wouldn't say hate, I want you to hate anybody, but the people that you should be focusing on, the people who are at the tippity top. It's not the people who is your neighbor. It's not the people that are working next door to you at your job, at the manufacturing plant. It's not your coworker at Dunkin' Donuts. It's not your coworker at these schools. It's not your classmate. It's the people at the very top that you should be focusing on that control so much. And we have so little. So she has to cut him off now because he's bringing it back up to the wealth distribution and the real power.
I think we need to
They're going to hate you. They're going to hate you, and they're going to hate Trump.
I welcome their hostility because as
I want to ask you. I want to ask you about an open border. I mean, take it away from Trump. The border is essentially open today. If you want to come into the country, you can come in, which the liberals have all said they're always for. They like the idea of an open border.
So now she's going to bring in immigration. See, I told you she's still trying to appeal to her base, but you got to understand, first of all, the border is not open. They make it seem like there's no type of barrier. That is not true. Joe Biden has been building on to Donald Trump's wall. Are people still getting through? Absolutely. People always find ways to get through. But to use this phrase, which I've seen them use a lot on Fox News, to say the border is just wide open and there's no type of protection, that is not true. We just got to call it what it is. Yes, people are still able to get across, but to sit here and pretend like Joe Biden is not actually adding on to Trump's border wall is BS. And that's why you can't trust mainstream media.
Do you think an open border has helped the plight of African Americans in cities like Chicago, in New York, St. Louis, Baltimore, Oakland, San Francisco? Has it helped their standard of living?
Listen to how she phrased the question, guys. Listen to how she framed it. Do you think an open border? So you have to push back on the framing first.
Well, I mean, one is that you first always have to begin at the top. You have to look at the ways in which the business people and the property owners bring in cheap labor in order to keep the wages low. That's why I support not just trade union movements. That's why I support the various strikes that's on the way this summer to make sure working people gain concessions because
you sound like Ron DeSantis.
Seem to be so greedy. They seem to be so greedy. No, but no.
See what she's doing? You see this? Oh, you sound like one of the other conservative politicians.
Oh, no, but the problem with DeSantis is he's got this xenophobic dimension to it. I want the immigrants and the workers of all colors to come together against the bosses. DeSantis still has too much xenophobia for me. And that's a radical difference between right-wing populists and highly left-oriented people in love with poor and working people, no matter what color.
Cornel, I think that, and may I call you Cornel? I always call you Dr. White. Cornel,
Oh, absolutely.
Dr. West.
Absolutely, my dear. Absolutely.
Do you think there are ways for the left-wing populists and the right-wing or conservative populists can work together on these issues, where there is common ground, whether it's on the war front
there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. My dear brother Clifton West has said that what we need is a paradigm shift in politics. What we need is an ideological realignment of the landscape. And what that means with those who have critiques of predatory capitalist processes, those who have critiques of white supremacy, you and I are going to fight on the vicious legacy of white supremacy, because the racism is still operating, not as intense as it was 75 years ago, but it's still there in so many different ways. I think of what's happening right now with my two dear brothers in Mississippi. We have to, but also I don't downplay the vicious attacks on my gay brothers and lesbian sisters and trans, and the defense of women and women having control over their bodies and reproductive rights.
Do you think, you know what I don't know your view on, Cornel, is
see, now she has to interrupt again because he's starting to bring up social issues.
Your view on trans athletes in women's sports, because you are a big champion of women. We disagree on the abortion issue, but you are a big champion of women, and I appreciate that. I was a female athlete my day, ages ago. But what about that?
Yes.
Do you think trans men who are biological men should be in the Wimbledon finals?
You know, I mean, I am committed to the dignity of precious trans folk because they're so vulnerable, and I just hate to see
women
them
don't have a shot
assaulted
then.
and attacked. No, but I'm also willing to learn and listen in the argument, because I think it depends on case to case and context to context. I just want to make sure that the most vulnerable are never, ever
Women are
trashed.
vulnerable. Yeah, women are vulnerable. If they're competing against men in most sports.
And now she's going to put words into his mouth. So yeah, that's Fox News. This is what they do. Like CNN, you just saw two different interviews with Dr. West, one on CNN, one on Fox News. Notice that both of them tried to put words into his mouth, tried to make it seem like you should be afraid of him running as a third party candidate because, oh God, or you're more aligned with the conservatives, or what are you trying to do here? And that's just a big place. A big part of mainstream media is to invoke fear. And this is something I've talked about oftentimes, but Dr. West is used to that. He's been on Fox News and CNN before, so he knows how to push back on those certain things. Now, one thing I will say is when she did say with an open border, if I was him, I think he should have pushed back and said, well, the border isn't open. There are barriers in place. However, people are still able to get through. So yes, we do need to have some type of immigration reform, right? So I would have addressed that a little bit differently. Now, here's another thing where I want to give Pasta from Convo Couch credit for this interview. Please watch the full interview on Convo Couch, but he clipped different segments. And this one is about Dr. West on calling Trump a neo-fascist. And I think that Pasta really brought up a really good point here that I hope that Dr. West will take to heart.
Confusing to me. You have said right out the jump that you are planning to go into Trump land and to speak to Trumpers and try to connect with them. How can you connect with them if you continuously call Trump a neo-fascist? I mean, how are we going to extend an olive branch where we're just pretty much shunning people away? I mean, I would also like to talk about that word neo-fascist when we're done, because I think it's a BS word. It is absent from the original meaning of fascism, which is actually corporatism, the merger of state and corporations, where we keep our eye on the prize. Neo-fascist is more of a term where we look at our citizens. It seems like it's been weaponized. But first things first, how do we connect with Trumpers, Dr. West, if we're going to just shun them right off the bat?
I thought this was a very good question. And I think more people need to pay attention to this. I think it's true. Like, we do have to be... The thing is, if you are going to go into Trump country and you're using the phrase that Trump was a fascist, people are going to tune out. They're not going to hear anything else you have to say after that, even though you may have really good things to say that could win them over. So I think the way you lead these conversations and the way that you frame things is very important, which means, and some people may not like to do this, but this means that you may have to change your communication style to the audience that you are addressing, This is something they taught us in undergrad in my communications class. It's not always easy to do. But one of the things that they do teach you, and journalists and reporters are good at this, you have to learn how to adapt your style of communication and even your vocabulary sometimes to the audience that you are addressing at that point in time. The way that you speak to me may not be the same way you're going to speak to the president of the United States. The way that I would speak to my former students is not the way that I would address someone like Dr. West. Does that make sense? So you have to tailor things to the audience. But listen to this, because I thought this was really important.
Oh, but I'm not shunning them at all, though, brother. The first thing you do when you approach another person is you don't see a stereotype, you see a human being. And you zero in on their wounds and their scars, but also their perceptions of the world. But you have to be honest. I have to be honest in terms of how I understand the world. You see, so when I come in and I've already honestly said, well, I think the Pied Piper that you're following at the moment is a gangster. And I define what gangster activity is: saying and doing things with no accountability, no answerability, taking no responsibility. And then I say, as a neo-fascist, neo-fascism is scapegoating the most vulnerable. So you can attack the immigrants, you can attack Black folk, you can attack gays and lesbians, rather than confronting the most powerful. And the most powerful is Wall Street and military, not in rhetoric, but in your policies. In your policies. So I would tell him, look at Brother Trump and myself in terms of militarism. Now, he says that he's a populist. He says that he wants to pull back on big military, but every budget was a expansion of the military budget. Every move was an attempt to justify, put it this way, that he so often would want to justify that expansionism, just like the Democrats. I mean, Democrats are tied to big military too. So I'd have to be honest. So in that sense, it's not an attempt to smear and to trash. It's being very honest and candid. And they can come right back at me and use certain categories and certain names. And I would say, I'm glad you're honest about what you think about me. Now, let me tell you why you're wrong. If you think Brother Trump is not a gangster, tell me what your definition of gangster. If you think he's not a neo-fascist, tell me what your definition of neo-fascism is. Now, that's part of what we'll do today in terms of your definition of neo-fascism, more corporatist and so forth and so on. But mine is using the flag, using narrow forms of patriotism to mobilize citizens, usually feeling as if they're wounded and under attack, and then scapegoating the most vulnerable. That's what we saw in fascism of the past. It could be Jews in Germany and so forth. So that in that sense, you can't have a genuine Socratic dialogue or conversation if you're not honest and candid about what your perception is at the moment. Now, I might be wrong. I'm there to learn and listen from the Trump brothers and sisters, right? I might be wrong. But when I see xenophobia, when I see racism, when I see transphobia, when I see homophobia, I call it out. They say, well, Brother West, it's not that. Then convince me. But most importantly, I'm showing them I care about their suffering, and I want to make sure all of them as human beings and fellow citizens gain access to Medicare quality, education quality, jobs with a living wage, safe community, the same thing that any other fellow citizen deserves or any other human being deserves. So that's the beginning of that dialogue, my brother.
Okay, but
so I'm going to play Pasta's concern, because Pasta has been, I guess, like, he's reported in those areas, and his concern about the rhetoric. Listen to this.
See, listen, I used to use this term. I do a lot of work in Latin America, right? I wanted to send you this video I have of Cuba, of me trying to build a bridge where I go to Cuba and I bring a lot of baseball equipment and bats and balls. And I'm just trying to humanize people, to get that whole anti-communist sentiment out of their mind. Right. Now, the first thing I did, Dr. West, is I removed a term that is often used. It was used by Castro. It's gusano. It's calling people a worm, right? But if I want to convince and I want to have conversations with Marco Rubio if I see him, or Paulina Aguilar, or Bob Menendez, if I use that word gusano, it immediately shuts things down. And I feel that's what neo-fascism does. But I think the real part where people have a problem with is that you call Brother Biden a neoliberal disaster, when if you just put it on paper right now, and I'll tell you this right now, I think that sometimes people look at this and they're like, well, Dr. West is calling him a neoliberal disaster and calls Trump a neo-fascist, when the corporate entities are way more invested in President Biden than they are Donald Trump, that he's kind of carrying a little water for Biden, and he's making that excuse that it was okay to vote for Biden over Donald Trump, which I think, was completely wrong. If you told me today, and I'm never going to vote for Biden, I'm never going to vote for Donald Trump, but if you put a gun to my head, Dr. West, and said I had to vote for either one of the two, I'm voting for Donald Trump. We're on the brink of World War III here now. Can you see the hypocrisy there? And can you maybe square that circle right there and kind of give us a little insight to this whole, like, Biden gets this treatment, but Trump gets that treatment?
So here's my take on this. I don't trust either one of them. I don't trust Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I don't trust either one. But I will say this. I think that when Dr. West and I had this conversation last year, I asked him if he thought if Joe Biden was a fascist, and he said no. And I told him I think Joe Biden is. And I did give him examples. And one of the examples I pointed to were the mandates. I'm not going to go too deep in this because it's YouTube. I am on YouTube. I know I'm on Rumble, but I'm also on YouTube. But I'm not going to go too deep into this. But I brought up the example of the crime bill. I brought up the example of the mandates. And some people say, well, that was left up to the state. No, remember, Joe Biden actually also implemented that for federal contractors. So it wasn't just left up to the governors of these states as well. So there were examples to point to. And I did disagree with him in reference to that. I don't think that Joe Biden is not a fascist. But that's just me. I think that there's a difference. I think there's overt and there's covert, right? Just like there's overt racism, which is really bold and loud. It's in your face. Covert racism is more subdued. Sometimes it's hard to tell that it's actually racism. It can be mistaken as something else. And I've said this before, that Donald Trump was overt, but Joe Biden was covert. But they were both still doing some of the same things. And I think that's something to look at and to focus on. So I think what Pasta is trying to relay here to Dr. West is that if you do go into those areas and you refer to Donald Trump as a fascist, you are going to lose their ear and they're not going to want to listen to anything else you have to say. So I get that as well. I think, again, you have to tailor your communication to your audience. Now, I want you to watch this interview because that's just a clip. The full interview is on the Convo Couch. But there's something else that's a problem here. And Pasta shouted this out. We all know that YouTube has these issues with censorship. We know that. We know that YouTube will shadow ban people. But apparently, so is Rumble. Because apparently, there's something about this interview that Pasta had with Dr. Cornel West. And Rumble, apparently, for whatever reason, is shadow banning it. Not kidding you. I'm not even talking about YouTube. I'm talking about Rumble. Listen to this. So Pasta actually went through this. They're going to walk you through it. Watch how that interview with Dr. West is shadow banned on Rumble. Watch this.
Put Dr. Cornel West. Well, Cornel West. Let's try Cornel West. All right. So we're not.
So this is Rumble, and they entered in the search term Cornel West. By the way, I tried this on my own as well, and the same thing happened.
Not there. Let's scroll through this now. Not there. Not there. Keep going. Keep scrolling. Not there. Not there. Not there. There's RBN stuff.
Indian News Network.
Hey, Indian News Network. There's RBN. Keep scrolling. Oh, he's running. Oh, there's due dissidence. All right, cool. Couple due dissidence. Keep scrolling. More due dissidence. Indian News Network. RBN. Keep scrolling. Keep scrolling.
Useful Idiots.
Keep scrolling. Useful Idiots. JB Font. Progressive Toast. All right, go to second page. Surely we must be on the second page. Due dissidence. RBN. Keep going, guys. RBN. Who else? Jimmy. Oh, wait. Let's go up quick. Jimmy Dore show. Okay.
Progressive
Soapbox. Okay. Revolutionary Blackout. Sticks, Heads, and Hammer. There's RBN. Do Dissidents. Okay. All right.
All right. Now this is most relevant. Let's try looking at.
Wait. Let's keep going though. Let's keep going.
You want to keep going? You want to keep going?
Because
so they're doing two searches. There's one that's most relevant and there's one that's most recent. But just keep watching this.
Mine should be relevant. Why wouldn't mine be relevant?
I was going to say let's just do most recent because some of these are 13, 10 days ago. Let's check. Do you want to keep going?
Go number 3. No, because it's got most relevant and it should have showed up by now. Breaking Points, Stan Nauman. Most people are going to just put that in there and check. Denise DeSouza. These are years ago. Some of them. All right. Yeah. Okay. Indy Left. Okay. Do Dissidents. Let's keep going. Let's see if I'm on here at all. Let's just see if I'm on here at all. Keep going. Nope, I'm not there. Go to number 4. Okay,
there's me.
There's Sabby Sabs. She's deep. I mean, buried. Jordan.
Well, she showed up on the first page too, though.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, she was on the first page. JB Font.
Generations.
Majority Report. Let's get him in there. Okay. Keep going. All right. Wait. I gotta be somewhere. No. Okay. We Are the News. People's Party. Sticks, Head, Hammer now. Hardlands. Okay, let's go to number 5. I gotta be on the 5th page, right?
There's me again.
No, not seeing anything.
Sabs. There's Carolyn Bursenko, whatever her name is. DJ Elf had one. Okay.
And now we're getting into older videos because this video of mine, Call for Peace, Cornel West and Medea Benjamin, that's from 5 months ago. So just FYI.
All right. Okay. RBN again. RBN. Okay.
All right. There's Candace Owens. Okay. Now this is relevant search. So maybe since your video was only like 2 days ago, it'll show up in most recent.
No, because they had videos that were up. The 2 dissident ones that were after mine yesterday were on the second page.
I know, but I mean it's most recent, so it should surely be up on the first page.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say, it should be here, and I know it's going to be here eventually by most recent. But the factor, what decides what is relevant?
Well,
there's ones with 29 views, 9 views, 9 views. There's videos up there that have hardly any freaking views. How many do we have on the Convo Couch right now?
So some of these videos that are showing up on the first and second page have very few views. So that's another thing. Again, this is Rumble for those just joining. This is not YouTube.
I'm going to tell you how many we have. I'll go to real quick.
Well, the reason I want to bring up most recent because I don't think you're right about it.
Because hopefully
I don't think you're right.
So he's going to go to most recent, and let's see.
4 days ago is longer, is longer than when we did.
Okay, so it's almost 1.5.
Sorry, let's go right here.
It's Sabby Sabs. 4 days ago is longer, is longer than when we did.
Okay, so it's almost 1.5. So we're not on. Okay, we're not even on. We're not even relevant.
We're not on most. We're not even on most recent.
They don't even show up.
6 days. Look at that.
So that was just something that I wanted to show you there. I don't know what's going on over at Rumble, but that was kind of strange that they don't even appear at all. And channels with less subscribers than the Convo Couch on Rumble do appear. So what is it about that particular interview? It seems to be buried on Rumble. So I sincerely hope that Rumble is not starting to follow YouTube's lead and shadow ban people and suppress people. I sincerely hope, because that is a form of censorship to me. So I don't know. Go check out the Convo Couch on YouTube, also on Rumble. I think they're still demonetized on YouTube. So go check them out on Rumble and give them some love over there. But yeah, a couple of things from those interviews. There's some things I think Dr. West can work on, like Pasta mentioned about the phrase, the terms that he's using. If you're going to go talk to that community, that type of thing. But I think one of the things we did see is that when it comes to mainstream media, whether it's CNN or Fox News, they both just play to their audience, obviously, and try to make the person who is their guest that is going against what their audience want look like the bad guy. And that's just how both of them work, to be honest. All right, let me get to some of the comments and then we'll move on. Charlotte says AFL-CIO is a union umbrella organization. They're not actually a union. They never, I think you mean never. They never consult with their members. It's a small cohort of insiders doing this dirty scam. I'll bet the nurses are pissed. See what I mean? Shout out to Joey Peltier for becoming a Sabby member. Whoop, whoop. Shout out to Linda Bonnie Bostrom for becoming a Sabby member. Whoop. Shout out to Axel Strife O or Zero for becoming a Sabby member. Whoop, whoop. Shout out. Mikey G says, I only watch PBS, NPR, and C-SPAN, LOL. All publicly funded, not corporate funded. I think it came out recently that NPR was funded by the government, though. And they didn't like that too much on Twitter. They were not too happy with Elon for putting that label next to their account. Shout out to Kit from Hardlands Media. JB, my comrade from RBN, says she's no different than liberals. The liberals tried to get Cornel West to run as a Democrat. Laura is trying to get him to endorse the GOP. And thank you for the super chat, Perry Stein. Okie doke. Let's move on to our next story. We have been following this war with Russia and Ukraine. And we've also been talking about BRICS on this show and how other countries are deciding that they are actually going to go in opposition to the US dollar and they're going to try to find some leverage of their own, right? So now, Vladimir Putin has met recently with African leaders. And the conversation, if you could imagine, was about this conflict with Ukraine. Where do we go from here? And should the US government be concerned that African leaders are meeting with Vladimir Putin? Let's get into it.
African leaders arrived in St. Petersburg Saturday to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin as part of an effort to mediate in the Ukraine conflict. Here's South African President Cyril Ramaphosa.
And we are here to communicate a very clear message that we would like this war to be ended.
Putin interrupted the remarks to deliver a list of reasons why he believed many of their proposals were misguided. He reiterated his position that Ukraine and the West has started the conflict long before Russia sent its armed forces over the border in February last year.
Now, I want to remind you, remember when it came to the war with Russia and Ukraine, countries in Africa decided that they wanted to remain neutral. They didn't want to take Russia's side. They didn't want to take Ukraine's side, which I think was probably the best position. Keep us out of this one. But they are here now at this meeting with Vladimir Putin asking for this war to end in an effort of a call for peace, which I think a lot of us do want. We do want this war to end. We don't want it to continue to escalate. But Vladimir Putin's pushback here is that, long story short, that Russia was provoked by Ukraine, that Ukraine has been provoking them over the years before Russia's invasion even happened. Africa wants this to end. And this should be very interesting to see where things go from here. I know that China, Xi Jinping had a conversation with Vladimir Putin as well to talk about some type of negotiation towards peace. Then it kind of fell off after that. So it seems like Putin is not willing to back down because he feels like he wasn't the one who started this conflict in the first place. But let's see. I don't know. Maybe African leaders could be the key here to convince him to move towards a serious peace negotiation. And let's remember, though, that it was just over a year ago that Russia actually did want to have some type of peace negotiation, but the U.S. government, the Biden administration, wasn't trying to hear that. So just keep that in mind.
He said Russia had never refused talks with the Ukrainian side, which had been blocked by Kyiv. When the African leaders called for the opening up of the Black Sea to allow them to receive grain shipments, he blamed the West, saying the crisis on the global food market is not the consequence of the Russian special military operation in Ukraine. It had started taking shape long before the Ukrainian situation developed. It started because the Western countries, the US and European countries, started unfounded and economically unjustified emission in order to solve their own problems connected with COVID.
Now, this is important. A while back, I did report on this, that there were countries in Africa that were starting to have like a food crisis, so to speak, and they were linking it to the war in Ukraine. But what Vladimir Putin is saying is that the food crisis had already started before that. So it's really interesting that countries that have nothing to do with this conflict at all, like countries in Africa, they chose to remain neutral in this conflict. They are feeling the effects of this war and they're not even involved.
The African leaders are seeking agreement on a series of confidence-building measures, even as Ukraine last week began a counteroffensive to push back Russian forces from Ukrainian territory they occupy. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky had said after meeting the leaders in Kyiv on Friday that peace talks with Russia would be possible only after Moscow withdrew its forces from occupied Ukrainian territory. Putin said Russia remains open to constructive dialogue.
So I did want you to hear that piece there, that they are remaining open to some type of constructive dialogue, because you're not going to hear that on some of the mainstream news, the mainstream news outlets that you're watching. They're not going to tell you that piece at all. They're going to make it seem like he's not willing to have any type of discussion and he's going to do what he wants to anyway. So I wanted you to hear that piece.
Thank you.
Уважаемый.
And I'm just going to speed up a little bit here because there we go.
Неформальный, практически в деталях обсудили очень многие основные, во всяком случае, аспекты.
They didn't change. I thought okay, there it is. I was about to say the captions.
И как договаривались, у нас есть возможность еще несколько слов сказать по нашим двухсторонним отношениям, а также по взаимодействию в рамках международных организаций, в том числе БРИКС.
So just remember this, people. We are open for dialogue on Ukraine. They are open for dialogue. So if they're open for dialogue, no one else should be trying to find reasons to escalate this war at this point in time. Take this home with you. Share this with your friends and your family members. They need to see that piece is very important, that they are open to that dialogue. I'm just going to fast forward a little bit here and then I'll go to the next clip.
And safety guarantees to Ukraine. Guarantees, like you already said, my dear friend, the President, the South African Republic, 18 articles. Moreover, there is an annex to this. I will not even talk about it in depth now. It has to do with military and other things. It's all in ink, up to the number of military equipment and number of troops. Here is the document. It was initialed by Kyiv delegation. Signature is there, but after we, as promised, drew our troops away from Kyiv, the Kyiv authority, just like their owners usually do it, threw it all to the rubbish.
До единиц боевой техники и до личного состава вооруженных сил. Вот этот документ.
Heap of history. I am putting it mildly and trying to be polite. They turned it down. Where are the guarantees that they won't give up any other agreements?
Отвели войска от Киева.
So he's saying that there was some type of peace negotiation, but he's saying that Zelensky turned it down. So I don't know if you're hearing that on mainstream media, but people need to hear that. And I have another clip here where it says the war in Ukraine must stop. South Africa tells Putin. Let's see this one as well. Now, this one is from Al Jazeera.
This is where the delegates from 7 African countries unveiled their initiative to end the war in Ukraine. 24 hours after meeting Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv, they traveled to St. Petersburg, hoping to convince President Vladimir Putin to accept their peace plan.
I want to emphasize once again, we are open to a constructive dialogue with everyone who wants to establish peace on the principles of justice and taking into account the legitimate interests of the parties.
But the U.S. government is not interested in talking about peace. Look at the people who have come to the table. African leaders, China, other countries in BRICS. Look at the people who have come to the table to have this discussion. And then people wonder, well, where is President Biden? Where's the US government on this situation? Meeting with Zelensky and giving him more money. Because the reality is the US government doesn't really want, they don't really want some type of peaceful resolution right now. It's too much money to be made here. And that's what this is really all about. Supporting the military-industrial complex. Come on. You just heard it with your own ears. You just heard him say that they're open to discussions. So what the question that should be raised by you as an American to the Biden administration is, why are you not actively trying to participate in these discussions with Vladimir Putin at this point in time? That's something that you should ask.
The African delegation is offering a detailed initiative, starting with de-escalation and ending with negotiations.
We are here to communicate a very clear message that we would like this war to be ended. We say so because this war is having a negative impact on the African continent and indeed on many other countries around the world. As a continent, we are being negatively affected in terms of our economies.
Critics doubt whether the African initiative can work, saying it lacks both the leverage and weight to push forward a solution. Others see it as a step in the right direction.
At least they're willing to try. At least they're willing to try. So the first step, they said, is de-escalation and then some type of negotiation towards peace.
A real settlement on this issue can begin only if there's a clear winner on the ground or there's a deadlock. Only in this case can we talk about a third path. And here, the African initiative will have a huge cumulative effect. All the previous initiatives, the Chinese, the African, and the Brazilian, all can together at a certain stage form the basis of a settlement.
Till then, attempts are expected to continue to bring both sides to the table. It's very rare that African leaders offer the mediation to solve such a multi-layered global crisis. But the war in Ukraine is having a major impact on the continent, especially
when you talk about the food. So this is another thing too. Some of these countries that are affected, they depend on fertilizer from Africa so that they can grow their food. So the sanctions that the US government has implemented on Russia, this is one of the ways that it affects other countries as well, and not just Russia, other countries that depend on that fertilizer so that they can grow food.
With the threat it's posing to food supplies. And some are optimistic that even if the peace plan doesn't go through, its ideas could have a positive impact on the conflict. Ali Hashim, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
A new 3-day.
Okay, so that was from Al Jazeera. And then there's a short piece here I want to mention from this article, because I really do want you guys to share this with people. We got to get the word out about this. Ukraine African leaders meet Putin on peace mission. And it says here, I'm actually going to make this a little bit bigger. A number of African countries have so far failed to condemn the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Putin also said Moscow was open to constructive dialogue with all those who want peace based on principles of justice and consideration of the legitimate interests of the parties. He also told the delegates without evidence that the current crisis on the global food market, which has had a large impact on Africa, was not a consequence of the conflict in Ukraine. South African President Cyril said the delegation recognized the sovereignty of countries in terms of the UN Charter, but that it at the same time respected positions put forward by both sides. We do believe that this is the time for both parties to negotiate an end to this war, which is causing a great deal of instability and harm. And that's the leader there of South Africa. Other African leaders in the delegations included Senegalese President Macky Sall, Zambian President Hakainde, and Cameroon's President Azali who also currently heads the African Union. Later on Saturday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on television that the Kremlin was in agreement with the main principles of a peace plan presented by the delegation. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry, however, said that although Putin has shown interest in the plan, it would be hard to realize. He said Russia would continue dialogue with the countries behind the plan. The African diplomatic team had traveled to Kyiv on Friday to call for peace after their continent was hit hard by rising grain prices due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There should be peace through negotiations. And that's coming from Ramaphosa. And he quoted Nelson Mandela several times during a news conference that followed the talks. I will say something, the way this is phrased right here, where it says rising grain prices due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I just want to add that the way that should be worded is due to the sanctions implemented by the U.S. government. That's how I would word that there. Now, it goes on to say, while in Kyiv, African leaders were forced to shelter when air raid sirens due to the detection of incoming Russian missiles. The Ukrainian Air Force later said it shot down 12, including 6 hypersonic ones. While there is no reported damage inside the city, 7 people, including 2 children, were wounded, the regional police said. So, I'll keep an eye on this. We'll follow this story. I think what this does go to show you is that other countries are willing to come to the table with Russia and have a call for peace, de-escalation, and then a call for peace. But the U.S. government is not. And that's what I want you to take home with you from this message. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin Hemp Car. Why didn't he say the spy state targeted the new left first and banned anyone for workers whom they called communists? West didn't answer a question of why the state targeting Trump. He said because he's targeting immigrants. But is that really the reason? And why did one day the FBI care or pretend to care about immigrants? It's the new look, question mark. Good question. And thank you for this tip as well. On dialogue with Trumpers. I think it says trumpeters. Dialogue with trumpeters. Dr. and former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, dissertation and thesis, 2015, using the term deep state. Thank you so much for that. And he also added Amy Goodman calling Jon Stewart fake news in 2015. Thank you so much for those. I think it's time to bring Cynthia McKinney back on. It's been a while. I'm curious to hear her opinion on these things. I'll go ahead to the next screen there, Eric. JB says Sabby, former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett stated that the West intervened to stop peace negotiations, particularly Boris Johnson and Biden. Well. Thank you for the super chat, Axel Strife. Remember when the sanctions would cripple the Russian economy and they will fold in 6 months? That was the razzle dazzle. Yeah, that didn't happen, did it? That did not happen. Okie doke. Final story tonight. RFK Jr. appeared recently on Joe Rogan. They've talked about a lot. I'm not going to cover all of that. But there are 3 parts that I do want to focus on. The first one is RFK Jr. discussing with Joe Rogan the military-industrial complex and his uncle, JFK. We're going to go through that topic first. Then I'm going to discuss the topic that he brings up about Monsanto and the environment, which I think is important for people to hear. And then we're going to get to the final one, which has caused the biggest stir. This whole idea of debating RFK Jr. There's a scientist that has come forward, give some criticism about this interview with Joe Rogan and RFK Jr., but yet he does not seem to want to debate, but I've seen him on everyone's show. So let's go ahead and get started with this clip here about the military-industrial complex. This is RFK Jr. on Joe Rogan.
The Joe Rogan experience.
My uncle, John Kennedy, did that. He refused to go to war.
So he was surrounded by military-industrial complex, and he learned very early and an intelligence apparatus that he realized early on that the purpose of the CIA and the intelligence apparatus was to create a constant pipeline of new wars for the military-industrial complex. The day, 3 days before he took the oath of office, Eisenhower, who was the outgoing president, gave what is probably the most important speech in American history, which was, where he warned against the military-industrial complex. I was at my uncle's inauguration. I was in Washington that day. I was a 6-year-old boy. And I was sitting on the stands behind him in front of him during his inauguration. And he understood that. And 2 months later, the military and intelligence came to him and said, we got to invade Cuba. And he was like, I'm not going to Cuba, and I'm not going to let the military. And they said, well, we got all these Cubans trained, and they're going to go attack Castro. And he said, well, we can't, the U.S. government can't be doing that. We can't be attacking. I don't like what Castro's doing down there, but it's not the United States' job to dictate what kind of governments other countries have. And they said, well, as soon as they land, there's going to be a big revolution. Everybody's going to rise up and they're going to overthrow Castro. And he said, well, you can't use the U.S. military. And they ended up bringing those guys over with United Fruit boats. And in the middle of it, in the night, they came to him and said, they're getting wiped out on the beach, and you need to send in the military and invade. And he said, we're not going to do it. And he stepped out of that meeting, and he realized they had been lying to him and trying to trick him. And he said, I want to take the CIA and shatter it into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the winds.
So what you need to take from this part of this discussion is that JFK realized that the CIA its crucial role was to make sure that these wars continue. One of its crucial roles to make sure that it continues, right? This is a perfect example in reference to when we talk about Cuba, how the president was even pushed by other forces, other agencies to intervene. And he realized that, right? Remember, JFK was assassinated. Now, we can argue about who did that, but I think we all know what's really happening here. He pushed back. He wasn't willing to follow the beck and call of these government agencies. And then he was gone.
And then, for the next 1,000 days of his presidency, he was at war with his military and intelligence apparatus. They tried to get him to go into Laos. He said no. They tried to get him to go into Vietnam with combat troops. They said that we need 250,000 combat troops. He refused. Everybody around him wanted him to go into Vietnam. He sent 16,000 military advisors. That's fewer people than he sent to get James Meredith into Ole Miss in Jackson, Mississippi, to get one black man into school. He sent fewer in Vietnam. They weren't allowed to fight. Many of them did. They violated the rules of engagement. In October of 1963, he heard that some of his Green Berets had been killed over there. And he said, I want a total casualty list from Vietnam. And his aide came to him and said, 75 Americans have died. He said, that's too many. And he signed that day a national security order ordering all troops out of Vietnam, U.S. troops. The first 1,000 over the next month, and then the rest by the beginning of 1965. And then a month later, he was killed.
You see what I'm saying? Now, people can sit back and say, oh, man, what a crazy coincidence. But maybe not. Let's think about this, people. So RFK Jr. is telling you that JFK was not about that life when it came to these wars. Wasn't feeling it. Heavily pushed back. Military officials, government agencies pressuring him to send in U.S. troops. This is why I continue to say the president doesn't really run this country. And I stand by that. Come on, people, look around. BlackRock is more powerful than the president of the United States. So think about that. And then just like that, he was gone.
So, but what his view was is that he believed that the view of Americans abroad should not be, a soldier with a gun. It should be a Peace Corps volunteer building, wells, and it should be USAID helping poor people, and it should be Alliance for Progress building middle class. And that's what he did. And he just started the Kennedy Milk Program to give nutrition to poor kids all over the world. As a result of that, in Africa today, there are more statues to John Kennedy, more boulevards named after him, more hospitals, schools, universities, avenues in all the major cities named after him than any other president. And that is the Chinese have taken that template and done the same thing now. And they are, all these countries that were supposedly allied with us are now realigning with the Chinese, and they're switching to their currency because the Chinese are not there to kill people. They're there, to build roads, to build universities, to build colleges. And it turns out that people like that a lot more. And, we should be projecting economic power around the globe and not military power. It will make us much stronger.
Because imagine that, because China is actually working to build community instead of destroy communities. The US government tries to destroy countries, communities, villages, steal resources. I told you they're trying to intervene in Haiti. I've been telling people this. People are like, no, they're not trying to intervene in Haiti. Now you see more evidence of that. Some of these third world countries have a lot of resources, folks. The people there may be poor. Doesn't mean the country isn't rich in resources. So that's something to think about. So if we think about someone like JFK, he was basically Bernie before Bernie. Think about this, people. He had also talked about having health care for everyone. Some people don't remember this. He didn't want to be involved in these wars. He was Bernie before Bernie. He was ahead of his time, at least in this country. And they said, no, we can't have that. So they said John had to go.
But what do you think happens when you get into office? Like if you're talking about your uncle who's assassinated and you believe the intelligence agencies were part of that, what happens to you?
Well, I gotta be careful.
He's not a threat unless he went. So here's the thing, because I think a lot of us had that question. Technically, he's not a threat unless he wins and starts doing those things. Then he's a threat. Right now, he's just a candidate who, if the DNC plays their hand the way that I think they won't let him be the nominee anyway. RFK Jr. said on Russell Brand's show that he knew the superdelegates were probably going to all go to Joe Biden. I said they won't be as obvious about it. They'll give some of them to him. But he knows 9 times out of 10, he's not going to be the nominee. But right now, he's not seen as a threat to those government agencies because he's not in office and he hasn't actually started to do these things. Let him get into office and him actually start to do these things. Then they will see him as a serious threat.
I'm aware of that, and I'm not, I'm aware of that danger, and I don't live in fear of it, at all. But I'm not stupid about it, and I take precautions.
So very interesting moment there. So he's telling you that he's not afraid, and now I want to go to the section here where he talks about Monsanto. And the environment, which I think you guys know, obviously he's he was an environmental lawyer. He's really passionate about like these types of issues. I think you need to hear this as well. And then we're going to get into the controversial Twitter argument.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
When we sued Monsanto, there's many diseases that are linked to glyphosate exposure, including non-alcoholic fatty liver cancers are very closely linked. A lot of kidney diseases, and then severe damage to the microbiome because it's designed to kill plants, and there are structures in your gut biome that are critical structures in your gut biome, which have plant-like metabolisms which are destroyed by glyphosate. And so, what happened is glyphosate was originally developed as a tank scalant. So to scale the calcium and other deposits, metal deposits, rust deposits from the inside of, underground tanks. And in 1973, Monsanto had to stop producing DDT because, we passed the laws at that time, and that was its flagship product. It needed another product. And it figured out that glyphosate, somebody at some point apparently threw some glyphosate on the, out in the back in the yard, and everything green died where it touched the glyphosate. And so somebody said, oh, this will be a good herbicide because it kills all plants. So originally, Monsanto developed it as a herbicide, but the way that it was applied initially from 1973 to 1993 was in backpack sprayers. So guys would walk down the corn rows early in the season when the corn was competing with nearby weeds for sunlight, and they would shoot the individual weeds. And then in 93, somebody figured out a way that glyphosate, there was certain bacteria that glyphosate would not kill. And they said we could take a gene out of that bacteria and put it into a corn seed and develop a corn that cannot be killed by glyphosate. So they developed Roundup Ready corn. And that corn, you can pour glyphosate all over it and it will do nothing to it. So now you could fire all of those workers who are expensive, and you hire one airplane and they fly over the fields. They saturate the entire landscape with glyphosate. Everything dies except the Roundup Ready corn. And within a couple of years, Roundup Ready corn was now on 90% of the corn, 95% of the corn in the United States is now.
So I do remember I saw a commercial for this. I think it was like a couple years ago for Roundup, and it was a malpractice lawsuit. Or actually it wasn't a malpractice lawsuit. It was a commercial saying that if you use Roundup and you're experiencing these symptoms, class action, sorry, not a lawyer, class action lawsuit. If you use Roundup and you experience these symptoms, please call such and such. You may have a case. I do remember seeing those. I remember seeing those commercials. So there were issues with Roundup. Now, I've never used Roundup. My parents never used Roundup. My parents were kind of old fashioned. You just get out there and you pull up the weeds. Like that's just kind of how they were. But there are a lot of people who did. They bought that, they purchased it, and then come to find out there were all these chemicals that were obviously not good for you and were a danger to you. So I do remember there was that class action lawsuit against Roundup.
Now Roundup Ready corn. And so, but it was still being, and then they developed it for soybean and for barley, for sorghum, for a lot of other plants. But it was still being applied early in the season. And then in around 2006, they discovered that if you sprayed it on wheat late in the season, it would desiccate the wheat. In other words, it would dry it out. And one of the big losses for farmers in wheat is if it rains during the harvest season, you can't harvest it because it gets moldy. And so if you can spray a desiccant on it and dries it out and kills it, you can harvest it right away and it won't get moldy. So all the wheat in our country started being sprayed that year in 2006 with glyphosate. And that's the year you saw this explosion of celiac diseases and, gluten allergies and all of this stuff that people, that you may have noticed around then.
But I got to add this in here because I am also on YouTube, and I have to add, I don't have any scientific evidence to prove that, but this is what he is saying, allegedly, because I am on YouTube. I have to say it that way. But it is very obvious that these chemicals that were supposed to be a shortcut, so to speak, to make your life a little bit easier, actually had some side effects, health side effects. And that's why there is a class action lawsuit against a company like Roundup. Now, I do want to also mention this as well. There was another topic that I'm sure you know was discussed on this interview, and that was about the jab. I cannot play that on here because, again, I'm also on YouTube for those of you watching. I can't play that. But basically, to make a long story short, RFK Jr. expressed how he felt about the jabs. And the research that he has done. You've heard him talk about this on multiple shows now. I don't need to go down that road. Okay. We need to go down that again. However, ever since that conversation, there is actually a scientist who came forward. His name is Professor Peter Hotez, who didn't seem to like this conversation too much. And it started a sort of Twitter feud, so to speak, and a challenge from Joe Rogan. So I do want to go ahead and share this here. So Professor Peter Hotez said Spotify has stopped even sort of trying to stem Joe Rogan's misinformation. It's really true, just awful. And from all the online attacks I'm receiving after this absurd podcast, it's clear many actually believe this nonsense. So I just want to jump in and say, he started the discussion. Okay. So, because now Peter is pretending as though he's a victim here when he's actually the one who started the discussion to begin in the first place. Joe Rogan did respond, and he said, Peter, if you claim what RFK Jr. is saying is incorrect, I am offering you $100,000 to the charity of your choice if you're willing to debate him on my show with no time limit. So that happened. So this is Joe Rogan basically saying, all right, dude, put your money where your mouth is. Come on out. Let's do it, man. Let's go. RFK Jr. responded and said, Peter, let's finally have, I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger because okay. Let's finally have the respectful, congenial, informative debate that the American people deserve. So RFK Jr. is open to this as well. He's like, come on, let's duke it out. Peter wasn't open to it though. So like Peter wanted to complain online, wanted to smear people online, smear RFK Jr. And then when he received this challenge, he just wanted to kind of back down and then say, I'm being attacked. So he goes on to say, Joe, you have my cell, my email. I'm always willing to speak with you. So this is the, you have my phone number, you know where I'm at line of excuse that people will use. Instead of answering the question, he did not answer the question. And Joe Rogan went on to acknowledge that. This is a non-answer. I challenge you publicly because you publicly quote tweeted and agreed with that dog shit Vice article. If you're really serious about what you stand for, you now have a massive opportunity for debate that will reach the largest audience a discussion like this has ever had. If you think someone else is better qualified, suggest that person. So this is Joe Rogan really putting that pressure on Peter and saying, that wasn't an answer. Do you want to debate or not? And if you feel that I'm not the best person to host this debate, then let me know if there's someone else who is. So it's kind of hard to back away from this, right? Joe goes on to say, by the way, Peter, I saw this tweet that you deleted. And that's this one here. Be serious, Joe. That's what you throw out for your hunting buddies on a weekend. A $50 million endowment, which you, Spotify, RFK Jr. can easily afford. Not for me, but so we can continue making low-cost jabs for the world's poor. Preceded by an RFK Jr. public apology. So apparently Peter deleted this tweet. I wonder why. Interesting, huh? So he did. And then there's more. So Joe goes on to say, again, I am going to ask you very clearly, are you willing to debate RFK Jr. on my podcast? So Peter is trying to have this argument with Joe Rogan about the scientific evidence that he has compared to what RFK Jr. is saying. But instead of having this conversation with RFK Jr., he's actually arguing with Joe Rogan, who is not the person that is, wants to be a part of this debate. RFK Jr. was the person who made the statement. So Joe Rogan is offering to host a debate for both of them on his show. Now, here's my thing. If you are so confident in your research and you stand by it, why wouldn't you have the debate? What do you have to lose? If you're confident that what you're saying is correct, you have the data to back it up, you've done the research, why not just go ahead and debate RFK Jr., get it over with, and prove that you're right? He didn't want to do that. Instead, he decided to go run to Mehdi Hasan. So this is the kind of thing, like, I don't have time for it, people. I don't have time. I said this, I tweeted this. After being challenged to debate RFK Jr. by Joe Rogan, Peter Hotez ran to Mehdi Hasan for protection. And that's how I see this. I see it what it is. It's like, who can I go to protect me from this? Because Elon Musk jumped into this conversation. Also, it wasn't just Joe and RFK Jr. Other prominent people jumped in. Jon Stewart jumped in at some point. The thread is long to follow, but all these different people jumped in. And so my thing is, he felt like I need to have some protection because all of these big shots are, jumping on me now. So let me go talk to Mehdi Hasan. And that's what happened. Now, I'm not going to play this video because it is YouTube. I'm sorry. But basically it goes on to say that Peter responds to being asked to debate RFK Jr. Look how they phrase it. Again, see, they keep saying that. They keep saying that. And Mehdi's a fucking joke. Goes on to say that this information is now a lethal force in the United States. I offered to go on Joe Rogan, but not to turn it into the Jerry Springer show with having RFK Jr. on. So to me, that means you're not that confident and comfortable with your information to have the debate. This has nothing to do with Jerry Springer. I ain't see RFK Jr. pick up no chair and throw it at nobody. Come on. I haven't seen RFK Jr. punching people on stage. That's Jerry Springer show. This has everything to do with Peter not being willing to have that debate because he's afraid there is a chance, even if there's a small chance that some of his information is incorrect, he is afraid he will be exposed. And that's what that is about. Who goes on to the interview with Mehdi Hasan? First of all, we know who you are, Peter. You know you're a doctor. We get it. You're a scientist and all that jazz. Why you go onto the show with the lab coat on? Who does this? Who does it? Come on. Are you trying to prove to people that you really are who you say you are, Peter? Let's be real. This makes no sense. Listen, I worked at MIT. I worked for scientists. They didn't do interviews in lab coats. And they're some of the brightest minds in the world. So don't even come at me with that, man. Here he is, sitting here. Look. Here's his lab coat, his name. Look, everybody, I'm a doctor. I'm a scientist here. Pay attention to me. I have on a bow tie and glasses. I'm intelligent. Listen to what I say, damn it. Get real, people. Get real. Who does this, man? I think some of the comments were funny. Yeah, Nico said, don't they always? Oz said, more propaganda and lies from media corporation. They perpetuated lying about Russiagate and the jab, sponsored by the same entities, is supposed to be doing in-depth journalism and reporting about. Petty Hassan, Petty, wants to beat out top propagandist Rachel Maddow. They're all crap. MSNBS. Notori's here and she says they're both so freaking pathetic. Hardlands Media says because he is a coward and afraid. Like, it's just, I can't. I don't even know if this is real. Like, when I first saw this guy, I was like, is that a disguise? You know those little disguises that you see at the little party express stores where you can get like the glasses and the mustache and the... Oh, man. So it doesn't appear that debate is happening. But like I said, there goes Mehdi Hassan to come in and save me, Mehdi Hassan. Save me. And you know what makes it worse? After that, he went on to TMZ. So you're willing to go talk to TMZ as if that's serious news? You're willing to go on to TMZ, but you won't go onto the Joe Rogan show and have a debate? This is a joke. I don't want to go on Joe Rogan with RFK Jr. because I don't want it to be like the Jerry Springer show. But I'll go on TMZ. Get out of here. Oh my God. I can't. Oh dear. So, Peter has not blocked me yet, which is surprising. He's on a blocking spree if you challenge him, by the way. He has not blocked me yet. Look at this. Look at all my books, people. It just the ego of this guy. Look at all the books I wrote. Look at my microscope right in front of me in my profile picture. Like, who does all this, man? Nobody needs to do all that. Click on the picture. Yeah. What is this? Here's the microscope. Right? There's his name. There's the books behind them. I read books. Oh my God. Yeah. So he has not, I'm seeing if he posted anything else because Elon Musk did come after him too. And it's just a mess, man. Respected scientists announce a mass exodus from Twitter after Republican billionaire Elon Musk is a Republican now. When did this happen? When did that happen? I don't think it did. Elon Musk is a Republican, joins in this pile on him against the jab researcher Peter Hotez, claiming that he's afraid of public debate because he knows he's wrong. He's giving me Bill Nye the Science Guy vibes. Only Bill Nye, we used to watch Bill Nye the Science Guy when I was a kid, and our teacher used to show it in school. At least Bill Nye was somewhat kind of cool. Like, this guy's just not even, the cool meter doesn't even go off. So now he's afraid. Next thing you know, he's gonna be saying he's afraid for his life. Like, there's just so much I can't. Then he says, we'll still make an effort to remain on Twitter in the hope that it might rebound. Motherfucker, Twitter don't need you. I can't. Who makes this up? Who does this? Egos. And that is that, ladies and gentlemen. That is that. Thank you for the super chat. None of your business. They had 3 treaties signed by Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine violated them all. How can Russia trust Zelensky? Interesting question there. None of your business. What a hot mess. Oh boy. All right, guys, that's it for tonight. I am back. Yes, back from vacay. I'm not here on Wednesdays. I'll be back again on Thursday. For those of you that are part of the RBN Boston chapter, look for an email from me at some point tomorrow with the date of our first meeting. And yeah, that's a wrap. I think we're going to head out with, the poll. Almost forgot. Let's do the poll. Let's see what you guys had to say. Okay. Should the U.S. be concerned about Putin meeting African leaders? 38% of you said yes. This is pretty close. 38% of you said yes, 50% said no, and 12% said not sure. 948 votes. Interesting. If you haven't had the chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button, guys. I'm not doing call-in tonight. I have an early start tomorrow. But I will do call in Thursday night, so join me for that. Other than that, Eric, let's go out with, can we go back to the first page of Type VNC? We're going to go out with that Joe Biden, that funny video. Make people laugh a little bit when you head out. Laugh a little bit. Oh, I did that one already. Okay, I wasn't sure I did that. Sorry about that. But very interesting, guys. Very, very interesting. So we're going to go out with a laugh. I want to make you laugh. Here we go.
So I learned about roaches. I learned about kids jumping on my lap. And I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
Presenting the Best of Biden collection, now on home video. Now you can enjoy all your favorite wacky moments from America's senile old granddad.
Well, you know, gay bathhouses and everything. It's all about round-the-clock sex. It's all, come on, man.
Including sniffing a baby, awkward hugs, numbers are hard.
Go to Joe 30330.
Corn Pop.
And Corn Pop was a bad dude.
Racism.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
Stupid troops.
Clap for that, you stupid bastard. You stupid bastard. Stupid bastard.
Blank Stare. Blank Stare Part 2. Chris is Chuck.
All right, Chuck. Thank you very much.
All right. It's Chris, but anyway.
I just did Chris.
And many more.
Make sure the television, make sure you have the record player on at night. The phone, make sure the kids hear word.
But wait, call within the next 10 minutes and receive a free copy of Kamala's Kooky Cackles. That's right, 6 full hours of ear-piercing cackles that the whole family can enjoy. Here's how to order.
All right, guys, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.